Welcome to Planet People Mining Season 2. I'm your host, Allison Koppel. Here we present the stories of trailblazers at the crossroads of mining, sustainability, and communities. Hear what motivates top professionals in this field of impactful work. Accompany them as they describe their challenges and explore the issues they tackle. And for our Spanish-speaking audience, busca Planet People Mining en español. Today I speak with Dr. Priscilla Nelson, whose career spans from the Galapagos Islands to global expertise in tailings. She holds a PhD in geotechnical engineering from Cornell, was division director at the National Science Foundation while professor at the University of Texas, Austin, and former professor and provost at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. In 2014, she came to Colorado School of Mines, where she's a mining engineering professor and former department head. A 2016 Global Inspirational Woman in Mining by Women in Mining UK, she co-founded the Tailings Center in 2020 with the School of Mines, Colorado State University, and the University of Arizona. We discuss her style of encouraging ideas and the future of tailings, where people and land are at the center of holistic design, engineering, and management. Her curiosity and creativity are contagious, especially as we imagine the mine site as a complex human body system, as she humbly continues to learn. Priscilla, it is so good to have you here on the podcast. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Beyond what I shared in the bio, what are a few major life and work milestones?
Well, I started off going to college when I was 16, which was a little bit crazy. And I was going straight for a PhD. But this was during the Vietnam War days. I was a hippie chick, and I just bailed and went to Europe, did crazy things, came back, got a call from the Peace Corps, asked me to join the Peace Corps. I said, sure. Went down to Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands, came back, sang in a bar for a while, took a job on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline for 2.5 years. Then I decided to become an engineer. So I went back to school. I got a master's degree in engineering and then my PhD. And then I became a professor at the University of Texas at Austin. So for me, I'm not linear. I go where things look interesting, things that I've never done before. And from Texas, I went to the National Science Foundation. And from there, I went to be a provost at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. And then when I got tired of that, the opportunity came to come to Colorado School of Mines. And I said, sure. So I've been here since 2014. I've resigned tenure 3 times so far.
Wow, you have just condensed, I can tell, a number of interesting moments and stories in a very short amount of time. I have a feeling we're about to have a very interesting conversation. But skipping forward, at School of Mines, what is your current role? And why would you say the work you're doing right now is important?
Well, I came here in 2014 as the department head. And the department was very small, and there were 5 people in it. And I got the opportunity to hire people and really changed the character of the department. So when I stepped down, right about when COVID hit, we had a totally different department, which was really ready to play a different role in the world of mining engineering. But right before COVID, the tailings dam down in Brumadinho in Brazil failed. COVID hit. I took sabbatical, and I spent my year in sabbatical diving into tailings. And I think for me, tailings and mine waste and water management are the most important questions for the mining industry right now. So in 5 years, I have become somewhat of an expert in tailings and tailings management. And to me, that is what the world needs Colorado School of Mines to do.
What point was it early on that you realized that not only do I enjoy the outdoors, but I'm fascinated on how soil behaves and rock behaves? Or was it one single moment when you realized that not only do I like this is a career?
I generally am a very curious person about anything that I find interesting. So when I was a kid, I used to get out of the house as soon as I could and cross the main road, go down to the creek and build dams. Just for the heck of it, something to do, and I could get away from my mother. So I'm curious, though. I'm always after. I've never done that before. I think I'll try to do that. I think that staying curious and being what I think of as peripheral vision, every day I'm always watching what everyone else is doing. Where are the new ideas? And I came to realize that I think with my mouth open. So I could read something and it's questionable whether it's gotten into my head. But if I talk about whatever it is, then it's in my head. And while I'm talking, sparks are flying and I'm getting new ideas and making new connections. So when you asked me to come on the podcast, it's like, no brainer. I have an opportunity to talk. Yeah, well, Allison, you came here last fall and gave a talk, and you did a little demonstration where everybody broke up into groups of two. One was the complainer, and the other was the mining company. And I became the mining company, and you didn't let me talk. It was listening. I had to listen. And that was the hardest thing because the minute somebody starts complaining to me, my sparks are flying and I'm trying to solve it. But I couldn't do that because I had to listen so I could remember what they had said. It was horrible. So for somebody like me, that's a very challenging task you gave me. And I realized that the interactions that you have with communities would be very difficult for me to do.
But you can train yourself. Oh, I'm so glad that that exercise resonated. It's
Yes,
2 minutes of your life,
it's
but I have found it's 2 profound life-changing minutes.
yes. It's made me much more aware of what I'm not doing in addition to what I am doing. Well, you know what else I did? I found that was a training that I found useful was when I was going through the tenure process at the University of Texas. I don't like being judged like that. I didn't want to go through tenure. And what I turned to was acting. I started taking acting classes. And for me, that sense of, I think we all have this syndrome, where you feel like you're a fake and somebody can tell that you're a fake and that you're fooling them. And imposter syndrome. And I had that too, but the acting kicked it out of me.
So much of what you just said just resonated. One, I've done a lot of improv theater when I was younger, and I have always found that that might have been one of the best skills that I
Yeah.
learned, the improv theater training of just getting focused on that moment and just assuming for what it is, the situation, and say, go. And you
Yeah.
always say yes in improv theater, yes, and anyways, that really resonated.
Yeah.
That the times that I've engaged with you, you are great with ideas and really thinking outside the box. Tell me a little, let's switch gears a bit and talking about the work that you've been doing recently at School of Mines and Tailings. Talk to me a little bit more about this role in what actually is misunderstood about what you're trying to do.
So people who come to my office, they do that because they want to talk about ideas. To me, that's what a professor is supposed to do. And that's why I have to be that. I am outside the box. So if someone's doing research or talking about something that to me is in the wrong direction, I'm very direct. I will say, I think that's in the wrong direction. Have you thought about this and this and this? I never give the same talk twice. I never give the same lecture twice because I'm always thinking and making new connections while I'm talking. So to me, that's the job of a faculty member. And the same thing in the industry. I think dealing with tailings, there are so many approaches that have developed out of the civil engineering community that were just taken over to tailings. And I start looking at that and I say, wait a minute, soil mechanics is not the same thing as tailings mechanics. This is a different kind of material. We have to think about it differently. So I'm really trying to dig in and figure out what can we do now? What is going on? Because every single tailings dam failure that has happened has been a surprise. Every time it's a surprise. Nobody went to Brumadinho and said, I think that dam's going to fail. No, nobody thought that. So there are things that we don't understand and we have to be honest. So it's a constant dialogue with myself. And some people don't think like I do. And they look at what I'm doing and they just say, I don't know where she's going. But to me, that's my job.
I've never heard you explain it that way. I have had the opportunity to hear you speak in a number of forums, and you're right, it's never the same talk. That that is true. Even in this talk about your career, I've heard you speak about your career before, and I've learned a number of new things in this talk. So I know a lot of your work now is on tailings, and it's such a multidisciplinary, complex, and in itself emerging area of focus because there is a lot to change and solve and resolve. But what would you say, and it could be within the tailings realm specifically or other, what are emerging issues that you're interested in and you think the industry should be more interested in?
We made every one of those tailings dams that failed. We made them. Nature didn't do it. We did it. And we don't know what we did that allowed that to fail. And if you look at some of the other areas like civil engineering, after the Hyatt Regency disaster in Kansas City, where all of the walkways collapsed and many people were killed, the lawyers ran to that and wanted to keep control over the whole investigation. But ASCE, as a professional society, went in there and said, no, we have to do our own investigation. We have to understand what happened here so that we can change the codes, so that we can change the state of the practice. Well, right now, we don't really have a professional society that is working with the tailings people. So after every failure, the lawyers come in, they want to clamp down on everything. There's probably one independent review board that comes out with a report that says, here's what we think happened. But we never discuss the reports. In some cases, there's 2 or 3 different perspectives that got reported on. Different groups of people reached different conclusions, but there's no forum where it's discussed openly. So we're not acting yet as a profession. So I'm constantly trying to think of how do we make the platform where we treat ourselves like a profession, where we soberly look at what we don't understand and decide that we're all going to roll up our sleeves and go and fix it or find out more about it. So I think this is the evolution that's happening right now. Since dam failures and the global industry standard for tailings management came out, is that the possibility is we can get enough information shared that we might actually be able to fix some things that we haven't really been honest about, I think, understanding and admitting the things that we don't know thoroughly. So this is the evolution of a profession of tailings engineering and management. And we need that because we're having the demand for metals and for all sorts of critical minerals is escalating. So mining is going to be increasing, probably into lower grade ores, which means that the tailings production is going to just go out the roof. We are building tailings dams, some of which are 300 meters high. Well, you go to civil engineering and look at earth embankment dams that retain water, like make a water reservoir. There is no earth embankment dam 300 meters high. And those are built under engineering controls after decades, centuries of observing how the dams perform. Many failures over that period of time, but all learned from. So we don't have very many water dam failures at all. So we have to do the same thing for tailings and be just as assiduous, paying attention to that because the dams are going to get higher, the bigger reservoirs, If the dam fails, the consequences are going to be increasing, and there's still some things that we don't know. That leads directly into two areas that I think are linked to that. And one of them is the environmental enclosure aspects. We have a lot of tailings dams on the earth. Who knows how many? Maybe 30,000, maybe more. Very few of them have been closed satisfactorily so that the community is happy with the post-mining scenario. So we're reaching a point where for the next 10 to 20, 30 years, we're going to be closing a lot of dams. Now, how do we do that successfully? And how do we know that we have closed it in a way that's going to be long lasting? We don't know, because a lot of these dams we've never tried to close. So that's huge. But we also have all these legacy waste dumps and TSFs that were created a long time ago. Nobody knows how they were built. Nobody was watching. There's no records. So we have these piles of tailings, and we don't know what's in the tailings. And so we have to figure out how to deal with these legacy tailings, which very few have dealt with in the United States. Without the Good Samaritan law, nobody wanted to touch any of these things. But now we have a Good Samaritan law in place. So the next 10, 20 years, wow, it's going to be very exciting.
You just said a number of things, and I'm glad you ended up on a note that you're excited for the work to come, because for several moments that you were speaking around that there must be 30,000 tailings facilities around the world, that most of them are built under engineering conditions. We're just really not sure, necessarily what they are, and just rely that they were built under national codes that were verified and up to a standard that today we would feel comfortable with. What I wanted to add, and you touched on this, and this is where my practice, that these tailings impoundments are within communities with people living around them. And what I very much appreciate with the global industry standard on tailings management is about a third of the requirements are related to those communities. Either if during the design and construction of the facilities, the potential impact on those communities were taken into an account, and how those community members provide feedback in the process, so that it's not just that these facilities are built and adapted in a way, but that should there ever be a consequence, we can minimize the negative effects of those consequences.
Mhm.
These engineering facilities are not just built in a vacuum. They are built on real land next to real people. And either they're sitting right next to literally or on top of where, the engineers want to build this facility, or somewhere downstream where they can be impacted by it. And so that I find encouraging in how this is going, because we can look at the management, and even before the management, the design and engineering in a much more holistic way. Just to overshare, I was recently in discussion with a potential client, but they candidly admitted that they had never actually talked to the communities about their operational impacts. And this alignment to the GISTM would be the first time they ever do so. And this is a very mature operating site. And I was just like, oh, I'm so glad I'm grounded back in reality of where the bar really is. Because I had been in this bubble of companies who genuinely are trying to do the best thing possible. And challenging as that is, still very much trying. When the reality is, a lot of our industry is still in this state where they're not thinking strategically about tailings. They're not thinking holistically about tailings.
But the thing that really bothers me a lot is people accept the fact that making a TSF, building a dam, retention behind the dam, it's the cheapest way to manage the tailings. So it's got the lowest impact on the net present value. But it's the part of the tailings operations that have the highest risk. And the only way to reduce the risk, in my opinion, is to get rid of the water. So it becomes a case where the best dam is no dam at all. We have to find, and I think there are ways that can get rid of the water en masse behind those big tailings dams, get rid of all the water, and turn the soup into something like a mud. Right now, if the dam fails but mud is behind it, it's not going to flow. So we have to get to the point where we are not making risks, which we are right now. And People thought the silver bullet after Brumadillo was let's everybody do filtered tailings, and they get rid of the water that way. But the way we're doing that with filtered tailings, the way we're stacking up these tailings and getting up to 50 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters high stacks, these filtered tailings, compacted materials, don't behave the same way as soils do. So I'm a cautionary person. I mean, I'll try experiments that need to be tried. And I think that most of what we're doing right now are experiments, but we're not studying them as if they were experiments. When those tailings, they're sometimes called dry stack, they're not going to stay dry. They will become saturated. Now, what's the behavior of those things when they become saturated? Nobody's dealing with this right now. So we could be, by now, building filtered tailing stacks that we think take care of all the problems, only to find out in 50 years we built a new problem that we can't take care of. So this is the case where we have to be honest about what we know and don't know, and let's do the work to find out so that we're really taking these experiments, which every tailings facility is, and watching it very carefully, learning from it, so that 10 years from now, we're not going to be making the same problems or new problems. And we could do that. We're smart people, but we have to realize that we do not know everything.
But at a high level, that is why you need a holistic way of management and making sure a diverse set of people and roles are involved in that process.
Definitely. I mean, this whole, the social, the community intersection is hugely important. But even inside the mining operations, the tailings management is separated from the mill, right? From the producing facility. The people in the metallurgists, the extractive people, they are just trying to optimize product, right? They don't care what comes out of the tailings. And now we're starting to get to the point where tailings people can talk to the mill and say, look, you could decrease our risks by an order of magnitude if you would increase the average particle size by how many microns, right? If you made the tailings more coarse, we don't have the risks. Then they will say, we're not going to get the production. Well, go back to their drawing board and try to figure out how to get the required production doing something other than what we're doing now with flotation and such a huge use of water, which is causing all the trouble for the tailings management. So the whole geometallurgical flow from the mine operations in the pit or underground all the way through the material flow affects the tailings. Very few mining companies are thinking it as a continuum. And they just see the tailings coming out of the end of the pipe. And I think many communities nearby, they don't necessarily trust that that dam is not going to fail. And I don't know what a mining company can do to convince people that the dam will never fail when we have failures every year.
It's interesting the way that you describe it. And here, I'm obviously not a tailings engineer or an engineer full stop. But the way that you describe it, I do see a number of mining companies approaching it like this. It's kind of like the tailings are the symptom, and we're putting big band-aids over the symptom. But the real bottleneck, I mean, that I know, I took the operations course in business school. I do know the bottleneck is always about 3 steps up.
Yeah.
And, if you look, say, 3 steps up, it's not the tailings engineer. As you describe it, it's how it comes through the mill and what the product is that goes through the mill, and how do a number of professionals work together in a new
Yeah.
way with new metrics inside the company to decide what are we trying to achieve. And that's hard to do.
So you have to look that way and you have to look downstream too, because these tailings, many companies, they know their tailings have ore still in them, right? They're still got metal in them. The processing that they used was not appropriate to try to get all that stuff out. But now the technology is changing. People want to go back and remine. So how do you take a dam down when you don't know how you built it. And there's so many mergers and acquisitions. Mining companies will inherit or acquire major tailings facilities that they didn't build, and they have to figure out what to do with them. One of the things I did when I was doing my deep dive into tailings was I wrote the chapter in the SME Tailings Handbook that was edited by Kim Morrison. I wrote the chapter that is the future of tailings. What can we be doing with tailings? How can we recover value from the tailings, not just have something negative? There's many big companies that are looking at their tailings now. I also wrote a paper for tailings and mine waste, comparing what goes on with tailings as being like the blood of mining, so that you need to study your blood. What's the first thing you do when you go to a doctor? If you're not feeling well, you get a blood test. The blood test tells the doctor what might be wrong with you. We need to treat tailings as the blood of mining and learn from it.
It's almost like we need to treat, and I know this is an area of focus for you to think about, but it's really the human body, all the systems work together, and the blood is the one that connects it all. I really like the analogy that you just pulled out around the you test the blood, you test the tailings, but it really helps you realize that this is all connected and all of these systems and organs have to work together for this system to work. And too often we look at it such on a symptom by symptom basis, we miss that interconnection and holistic view.
Very much so. And I took that analogy with blood even further in a paper I'm going to be giving in April down at the PACE 2025 conference, where I think about all of the mining systems as being in parallel with the human body systems, whether we're talking about the nervous system and the brain, or talk about the immune system, talking about the lymphatic system, talking about respiration. There's parallels throughout. And I think if we study it like that, we're going to identify some potential things we can do that will improve the overall health of the mining operation. And that establishes the basis for trust with the impacted communities and environment when they have a way of thinking about what's happening that makes them feel that they can understand and help to anticipate priorities and actions that need to be taken. So I think it's really exciting to think about things like that.
I actually love the reflection first, internally, and what we were talking about on how too often I see in mining companies a siloing of the functions and missing these opportunities to collaborate and see problems in a more integrated way. And your analogy of comparing the mining operation as the different human systems and organs and how it all has to work together, I think is brilliant. I really think you're on to something there. I'm serious. And helping first and foremost internal leadership think of it that way. That, leaving out when you only have discussions about finance, so I'm only going to talk about with the finance people, or having a discussion about one aspect of rocks, I'm only going to have the geologists in the room. And when you think about it and this systems approach, you can't ignore big organs.
Exactly. We need that kind of curiosity that extends beyond your immediate training. To be curious beyond is what we need to do. And so I think that's my job.
So that's a good segue to how I always end my sessions is what advice would you give others who want to have success in this field?
First of all, I don't believe in linearity. A lot of people who are engineers are very linear. They know where they're going to be in 5 years and where they want to be in 20 years, and their career is all mapped out. Don't try to be linear. Get your peripheral vision open. See what's happening one way or the other. Be aware of other opportunities because it makes you a person who can handle complexity better. And that's what the future is going to be. So to me, if you try to be overly focused on this is my direction and that's where I'm going, something's going to get missed. And I want more people to be nonlinear. I also want more people to stay curious and wonder about things. You have to build your engineering judgment and tune it and make it better and better by having more and more experiences. You have to read case histories, talk to people who have done things different but be curious and not be afraid of new things. Not be afraid of saying, I don't understand why that happened. I better go and talk to people, read stuff, try to find out how I can understand something I don't understand and embrace that. The challenge of new things is fantastic. And that's the kind of engineers that we need. That's the kind of people we need in the mining industry. So to me, very exciting, but I think that one of the key things you have to do is make peace with yourself, that you're going to be authentic. And if you say stuff that maybe is wrong, don't be afraid of saying that. You can be corrected tomorrow, you get it right. But forgive yourselves. For me, that's one of the most important advice that I have for people is learn how to forgive yourself and not chastise yourself for having said something that was not perfect or written something that was not perfect. We're after good enough today and better tomorrow.
Good enough today and better tomorrow. That's the real key, is around that progression forward, but don't get stuck in, what is it, perfect is the enemy of progress.
Yeah.
Well, you sparked a lot of my curiosity in this conversation. I truly enjoyed speaking with you, Priscilla, today. Thank you so, so much
Oh,
for being part of this podcast.
my pleasure. And come back in 5 years, I'll have a whole bunch of other stuff to talk about.
I'm sure if I came back in a few months, you might have a whole bunch of other stuff to talk about. So,
No doubt, no doubt. That's right.
all
But
right.
it's been
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank
And
you
thank
so
you,
much.
Allison. Thank
Take
you,
care.
Allison, for doing this, for taking it on, and for bringing a perspective that teaches even a 75-year-old old lady professor things like listening.
Thank you for joining us. If you like what you heard, please like, provide a 5-star review, and amplify.